Modern man is imprisoned by the compulsive pursuit of pleasure, especially sexual gratification, because he lacks inner mastery. The very pleasures men chase are the chains that bind them. Crusaders, let's explore how lust becomes a prison, how men unconsciously worship the flesh, and how liberation is possible through awareness, restraint, and transcendence. There was a time when man bowed only to the sun, the sword, and the spirit. His gaze reached upward toward heaven and inward toward truth. But in the modern age, his eyes have dropped, and now they fixate downward, locked in orbit around the curve of a woman's body, the flicker of a screen, the synthetic worship of flesh. He no longer prays in temples of wisdom or strength. He kneels in front of pixels, performers, and perfumes. The throne where once sat courage, conviction, and conquest is now occupied by lust, and men worship at its feet as if it were divine. This is the new god of the modern male. Not divinity, but desire. Not creation, but consumption. And the most powerful sacrament in this faith is the female form. From the moment he is awakened to lust, a boy begins receiving silent sermons from every corner of his environment. Advertising tells him that power is having women. Music says real men indulge. Social media delivers a daily catechism of curves, cleavage, and carefully crafted fantasy. The digital age has done what temples could not. It has made the worship of flesh constant, normalized, and inescapable. And so, without realizing it, millions of men are catechized into a faith that demands no morals, only craving. They become pilgrims in pursuit of skin. But what appears to be freedom is actually enslavement. As Freud once wrote, beneath the conscious self lies the id, the primal zone of instinct and unfiltered desire. Freud called this the domain of the pleasure principle, a psychological law that drives humans to avoid pain and seek immediate gratification. At the core of this system is libido, the sexual energy that fuels life's passions and pitfalls. And when that libido is never mastered, never elevated, it becomes tyrannical. Freud warned that when civilization fails to channel erotic energy into higher outlets, men collapse inward. Their unchecked appetites consume them. They regress. They become prisoners of their own drives, mistaking the pursuit of pleasure for the pursuit of purpose. The body, in such a case, is no longer a vessel of potential, it is a drug. Now compare this with the Buddhist teachings on desire, a central pillar in the doctrine of suffering. According to the Buddha, tanha, or craving, is the root of human misery. Desire attaches the soul to the material world like a chain. It whispers that happiness lies in indulgence, but every fulfillment only breeds more thirst. The object changes, woman, wealth, status, but the addiction remains. You are no longer a seeker, you are a chaser. And the more you chase, the more distant peace becomes. This is the condition of the modern man, a being with infinite potential shackled by momentary cravings. In the absence of discipline, he becomes a reactive creature, constantly stimulated, rarely still. His mind is filled with lustful loops. His eyes roam like starving animals. His masculinity is no longer expressed through restraint and command, but through consumption and chase. And this fall is not accidental. It is systemic. In ancient cultures, the path to manhood was lined with initiation rituals, which taught boys to master pain, delay gratification, and face the fire of their instincts. These rites stripped away the childish impulse to indulge and forged a masculine will rooted in self-mastery. Warriors, monks, kings, these archetypes were shaped by sacrifice, not indulgence. But in the West today, initiation is porn. Masculine guidance is replaced with celebrity mimicry. Boys grow up believing that dominance is sexual conquest, and that a man's worth is found in how many women desire him. The soul is never consulted. The spirit is never disciplined. He becomes not a master of his world, but a servant to his flesh. And his libido, rather than lifting him to new heights, digs him into a deeper hole. The tragedy is not just spiritual, it's civilizational. As Freud noted, civilization itself requires repression, not in the Victorian sense of shame, but in the structural sense of redirection. When a society fails to elevate instinct into intelligence, pleasure into principle, and lust into legacy, it decays. And its men decay first. Buddhism speaks of samsara, the endless cycle of death and rebirth driven by ignorance and desire. A man trapped in lust lives out this cycle not across lifetimes, but in each day. Wake up, chase pleasure, crash, feel guilt, repeat. He is reborn every morning with the same craving, the same void, the same silent scream for meaning. In the alchemy of lust, you'll be taken deep into the ancient and forgotten discipline of sexual transmutation, a principle once reserved for monks, warriors, kings, and creators. He does not rule his kingdom, he drools over it. He does not conquer, he collapses. This is why the flesh is a throne, and why most men die as worshippers, never realizing they were meant to sit upon it. The feminine form was not meant to enslave you, it was meant to awaken you. But when you confuse hunger with holiness and seduction with salvation, you trade your crown for chains. And until a man reclaims his throne by mastering the energy that once mastered him, he will remain exiled from his own greatness. The worst kind of prison is not one made of steel, but one made of silence and seduction, so comfortable, so pleasurable, that the prisoner forgets he's confined. That is the tragedy of the modern man. His jailer is not violence, but dopamine. His cell is not locked with chains, but with cravings. And his sentence? Life, unless he awakens. There's a seductive illusion in the age of endless stimulation, that indulgence equals power, that a man who can have any woman is free, that the man with constant access to porn, sex, and attention is sovereign. But this is not power, it is dependency in disguise. The man who must feed from the flesh to feel alive is not a king. He is an addict dressed in a crown. At the heart of this illusion lies a form of erotic escapism. The average man is no longer required to build, conquer, or even relate deeply. He can now manufacture the illusion of intimacy with a few clicks. Pornography becomes the lover, the screen becomes the mirror, and slowly, the capacity for real connection, real presence, and real depth dies. What remains is a synthetic performance of manhood, propped up by lust and loneliness. Freud saw this clearly. He believed that most fantasies, especially sexual ones, weren't just pleasure-seeking, but attempts to heal deep inner wounds. The libido, he argued, doesn't simply crave flesh, it craves resolution. When a boy lacks security, validation, or a masculine role model, he often turns to fantasy to feel dominant, desired, or in control. But these fantasies are illusions. They soothe the ego while starving the soul. And in time, the man becomes a psychological hostage, trapped not by sex itself, but by what he thinks sex will fix. Buddhism calls this clinging, the grasping of something impermanent, believing it will bring lasting peace. But the law of impermanence is absolute. All pleasure fades. The kiss ends. The climax dies. The high wears off. And then the craving returns stronger than before. You aren't satisfied, you're enslaved. This is the dopamine loop, the biological engine of modern slavery. Each act of indulgence floods the brain with reward chemicals. But the more frequently the reward comes, the less effective it becomes. The receptors dull. The thrill fades. So men chase more extreme stimuli, more porn, more risk, more women. And what begins as desire becomes dependency. The highs are shorter, the crashes are deeper, and beneath it all, the man loses his center. He cannot sit in silence. He cannot withstand stillness. He cannot be alone without reaching for something to escape into, because the internal world he has neglected is unbearable. His mind, like his body, is overstimulated but underdeveloped, and so he becomes reactive, needy, fragmented, He seeks relief, but he cannot find peace because he has not earned it. This biological dependency reinforces a deeper spiritual slavery, the false belief that pleasure equals freedom. Western culture sells this idea endlessly, that to be free means to indulge, to sleep with whoever you want, to scroll endlessly, to binge whatever you desire. But this is not liberation, it is sedation. It is voluntary captivity wrapped in luxury. True freedom isn't the ability to say yes to every impulse. It is the power to say no and mean it. It is the ability to sit with desire and not be ruled by it. As Freud noted, civilization itself was built by sublimating instinct, not indulging it. Men who built legacies, empires, philosophies, and revolutions did not bow to their urges. They redirected them. In Buddhism, the path to liberation is not found in satiating the craving, but in understanding it. The Buddha taught that desire arises from ignorance, believing that something external can complete the self. The wise man does not run from pleasure, nor does he demonize it. He simply sees it for what it is: temporary, untrustworthy, and ultimately unsatisfying. The man who lacks this vision becomes a slave to every passing feeling. He is owned by the sight of a curve, commanded by the ping of a message, reduced to a stimulus response machine. And in this state, he is easily manipulated by marketers, by women, by culture, by his own emotions. Worse still, this slavery is internalized. A man begins to measure his worth by his desirability. His self-respect is outsourced to female validation. If women want him, he feels worthy. If they don't, he collapses. His identity is fragile, floating on the tide of attention. And this makes him controllable. This is not masculinity. This is servitude in disguise. To break free from this slavery, a man must realize a brutal truth. He has been lied to. He has been told that indulgence is the reward of freedom, that lust is a harmless game, that erotic power lies in how many women he can conquer. But true erotic power is the ability to resist when others obey, to remain sovereign when others submit, to build something eternal instead of dissolving in the temporary. Freedom is not found in the flesh, it is found in mastery over it. Until that lesson is learned, until the craving is seen, faced, and transcended, he will remain in the same gilded cage, polished, decorated, addictive, but still a cage. There comes a moment, if a man is lucky, when the high no longer satisfies, the chase begins to feel hollow, and the emptiness inside can no longer be ignored. It is a sacred moment, though it often arrives in the form of despair. The body is tired, the spirit is fractured, the pleasures that once excited now disgust, and beneath the surface lies a silent realization. This can't be all there is. That realization is not weakness, it is awakening. To escape the pleasure prison, a man must not simply fight his urges, he must redefine them. The libido, as Freud saw it, is not evil, it is raw energy, life force, drive. And in Buddhist thought, even craving can be transformed into a vehicle for transcendence if it is approached with awareness, discipline, and intention. This is the first step of liberation, recognizing that lust is not the enemy, compulsion is. The man who learns to hold his desire without indulging it begins to mutate that energy into power. This is not repression, but alchemy. It is the redirection of sexual force into creative force, into conquest, into purpose. It is how kingdoms are built instead of dissipated through lustful leakage. History is full of men who mastered this process. Nikola Tesla, who abstained from sex to protect his energy for invention. Leonardo da Vinci, whose celibacy was tied to an obsessive, almost mystical creative focus. Isaac Newton, who died a virgin but fathered the laws of motion. These were not weak men. They were men who refused to serve the flesh. They elevated their instincts into immortality. Freud called this process sublimation, the redirection of base drives into noble pursuits. The sex energy that could destroy a man becomes, when refined, the same energy that builds his legacy. Buddhist teaching calls this right effort, the conscious discipline of directing energy away from clinging and toward liberation. But it's not only historical icons who can do this. Any man, yes, even the man broken by porn, weakened by heartbreak, or addicted to fantasy, can become sovereign again. But he must reclaim his inner kingdom by rebuilding its foundation. Discipline. Discipline is the sword that cuts through illusion. It reintroduces sacred rituals into modern life. Morning cold showers to shock the body into presence. Digital detoxes to break the addiction to validation. Fasting from porn, junk food, and meaningless sex to reset the nervous system. Journaling, meditation, and breathwork to bring the unconscious into the light. These are not self-help cliches. They are the rites of the new warrior. And as he practices them, something happens. The cravings weaken, the stillness deepens, and a new clarity begins to emerge. A clarity that is untouchable, not because he's numb, but because he's awakened. The modern man must become a monk in the middle of madness, untouched by the storm of pleasure, not because he hides from it, but because he sees through it. He understands that the woman's beauty is real, but temporary, that her seduction is powerful, but not divine, that his need to conquer her is not his essence. It is a shadow, waiting to be integrated, not obeyed. Buddhism calls this the path of non-attachment. You can appreciate beauty without needing to possess it. You can feel desire without being ruled by it. And in doing so, you discover a hidden truth, that your power was never found in domination, but in self-command. When a man learns to see women, not as gods to worship, nor enemies to fear, but as sacred mirrors reflecting his level of mastery, he becomes untouchable. He's no longer seduced by every smile, nor broken by every rejection. He walks with presence, with sovereignty, with a quiet flame that draws attention without asking for it. This is the final awakening, to stop worshipping the flesh and start embodying the spirit. Your body is temporary, your pleasures are fleeting, but your soul, your will, your mission, these are eternal. And every drop of energy you spend on pleasure that doesn't elevate you is a drop of your destiny being wasted. Freud warned that unmastered libido would sabotage the self. Buddhism warned that unchecked craving would bind the soul. Both were right, but both also offered a path: awareness, discipline, transformation. The man who takes this path becomes something rare, something dangerous, something remembered. He becomes a man who walked through the fire of lust and emerged clean. A man who once bowed to the flesh, but rose to command it. A man who died to craving and was reborn in purpose. That is the great escape. And it begins the moment you realize your pleasure is not your power, your restraint is. Thus remember, we are Indecepta. Becoming Indecepta is the code they never wanted you to learn. A psychological war map for men, forbidden teachings fused with modern strategy for influence, dominance, and self-mastery. If you want peace, prepare for war.